This is all theater. This is all just political theater.
Political theater. Political theater.
Pure political
theater.
Theater.
Political theater.
The
nefarious,
Significant and protracted
political
theater for political theater's sake.
I yield back.
From Washington, this is Political Theater, Roll Call's review of the spectacle of politics on Capitol Hill and across the country. I'm Jason Dick. Let's face it, barring anything truly unforeseen, we are already in the general election of 2024, and the most likely nominees for the two major parties will be Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Yes, we have a lot of primaries to go. There's a lot of real estate to cover in the next few months for there, but the presidential election is kind of on cruise control. Let's talk about some of the dynamics going on with John Bennett, our editor-at-large here at Roll Call, who has a new story about some of the concerns that people, I feel, have been voicing for a while that they were finally comfortable kind of going on the record about with the Biden campaign. These are Democrats across the ideological spectrum in both the House and Senate that John spoke to or picked up on what they were telling other outlets. And John, let's talk about your story. Welcome back to Political Theater.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
So I'll even hold it up. We were saying like this very, very kind of old school. It's I always love the part on Washington Journal and C-SPAN where the host is tracing, with yellow highlighter and so forth and a pen, the parts of the story that they want to go over with a journalist. You spent our first week last week back with Congress back, talking with people in the Democratic Party who they seem okay now. There was for a while there was this hesitancy to criticize the White House, to criticize the campaign. It seems like people are warming to that, and I don't know if that part of that is that some of the reports that we saw that the former president Barack Obama had voiced his concerns to Joe Biden's team back in December. But you talk to several folks who are integral to the Democratic coalition if they want to be successful with this campaign, and it paints a picture of a campaign that seems to be kind of lurching forward, waiting to get its footing.
Yes, and that's partially by design. Quentin Fawkes is one of the senior Biden campaign managers, and I was on a call, I believe, early January, and he said it again Sunday on MSNBC. He's been on TV again since, that this is by design, that they want to, it's kind of like, for sports analogy right out of the gate here, you want to get hot right before playoff time. That's when you really want your team to peak. And that's kind of the approach, that they're going to staff up methodically. They've already raised a ton of money. That's one place. That's one thing no one griped about when in my reporting. So the fundraising, that'll continue, but staffing up, ground game wise, ad buys, they're really harvesting their money right now. And when you talk to people, it's really two things. It's messaging and it's the composition of the campaign. When you talk to folks like Steny Hoyer, the former House Majority Leader, who admits he has concerns, he talks a lot about messaging and needing to do a better sales job. He says that he thinks Biden is the most successful American president of either party since Franklin Roosevelt. No Democrats that I talked to, or like you said, picked up on, who talked to other outlets, no one is saying that this has been an unsuccessful term or presidency. In fact, they all agree. That's the one thing they all agree on, is Joe Biden has gotten a lot done. He's ticked off a lot of not just his own agenda items, but the party's agenda items. And he's done things that his predecessor couldn't. And atop that list, of course, is the bipartisan infrastructure law. I was at the White House all 4 years of the Trump presidency, and I was in on that joke that every week was infrastructure week.
Yeah,
but
it was a punchline.
They never even sent a draft. They never even sent really a one-pager over to the Hill, much less proposing bill text. So when you talk to folks like Steny Hoyer, he says they need to refine their messaging, that they're hitting a lot of the right a lot of the right issues, but they're just not focused enough. They're not aggressive enough. They're not out there enough. When you talk to folks like Congressman Benny Thompson, Democrat from Mississippi, of course, he was the chairman or the co-chair of the January 6th investigating committee, and he was involved in the 2020 Biden-Harris campaign. And he says, well, there's a reason, and this shows up in polls that the president and the vice president have some work to do with black voters, especially black male voters. And Thompson says they don't have enough of those kinds of voices in the tent, as he put it. And he said right now they just need a bigger tent and bring more diversity into the campaign, more black political experts, more Hispanic, more Asian. And then when you talk to folks like Joe Manchin, who could be a spoiler, I realize that was one reason I was glad that I ran into him. He may launch a third-party run. He had an interesting comment about the campaign's messaging. He says they shouldn't worry about Donald Trump. They should just worry about making the case and improving their sales pitch about what this president has done. One thing that really came through to me, and I was thinking about this while I was on the Hill last week. I've been doing this a while, and I can't think of any politician, elected official, who has gotten some things done. It's not like Joe Biden is just tweeting all day. He has gotten some things done. He's pushed things through Congress. He's gotten involved. He's been a very active foreign policy president as well. But just how many different groups within the Democratic tent, as Thompson put it, are upset with him for so many different reasons. And that's a problem, because it's not like they're mad at him because the infrastructure law didn't go far enough. It's 5 to 8 things. And how many Band-Aids do you have to constantly be putting on all this upset?
Yeah, and I think that what's striking about the sort of this chill vibe, that the Biden campaign has, is that they're saying, we're taking a playbook from the last time when it was, no drama Biden, sort of taking the, like the sequel to No Drama Obama. We're going to explain to people how things are going. We're going to, be ready for the general. We're going to staff up, as you pointed out. But he's at 33% approval now. That's like Dick Cheney territory. This is, at the very depths of where and below of where Trump was at his worst moments, his worst moments for approval during his presidency. So it's getting late. I get it that November is 10 months away, but changing people's perceptions is very difficult. The economy is always a lagging indicator. And sometimes you get feelings so baked in that they're hard to unbake, if you will. And I was particularly struck by, the section in your story that where Bernie Sanders, was talking about, there's a lot of young people who cannot stomach what's going on with the Israeli-Hamas war and the effect that it's having on Gaza. And that if he loses young people, he's really gone. So you've got black men, young voters, Hispanics, progressives, and it's all a different sort of thing, but some of these things are beyond his control. At the same time, it does seem that they have to do something if they want to change the course of it, other than just sort of kick back and say, we'll be ready for November. Because certainly on Tuesday, when we saw Trump really roll to victory in Iowa, there's no other way to describe it. When you beat somebody by 30 points, that is a whooping, and no matter how you try to say oh, well, he had weak competitors. No, he had two. He had a sitting governor and a former UN ambassador and governor, and a 38-year-old whiz kid tech billionaire. So Trump isn't waiting, to sort of make sure that people are hearing what his message is. And so, but the Biden people are like, well, we'll just see how this works out. Maybe we'll figure something out by, I don't know, August during the convention when people are really tuning in. It is. And the people you talk to are like, no, we really have to go, it's go time.
Right. That's the sense I got in reporting this out. Is that, yes, it's go time. What are you guys waiting on? But even Biden's campaign, senior campaign officials, have told us that they're waiting by design. Again, they say voters aren't paying attention right now. Voters aren't thinking about this as a choice between Biden versus Trump. They just know there's a presidential election and there's all these debates and primaries, but not in my state yet. And I'll think about it. I'll think about it when I need to think about it. I think that's a heck of a gamble when you're going up against a guy like Donald Trump. And Trump had a line. I've actually saved it, and I refer to it every now and then, depending on what I'm writing. At a town hall he did with Fox News on December 5th, Trump said, speaking about his own philosophies and policies and a possible second term, quote, "Who doesn't want strong borders and a strong military and low taxes and low interest rates and go out and buy a house," end quote. That is, in a sentence and a half, a pretty good summation of what I'm going to do for you, or a promise. Now, if he can keep it, those are all big, hard things to accomplish. But Biden doesn't have a line like that. At least I haven't heard it yet. Bottom down, top out, or middle out.
It's the equivalent. Trump's saying that is sort of the equivalent of like the cliche: a chicken in every pot, a car in every garage. I mean, like that's what people want,
Right.
and they don't want to be told why they don't like the economy. They don't want to be told that they're wrong. And this reminds me of another cliche that I've heard for years and years in Washington, which is that sometimes Democrats would rather be right than win. And it seems like they're sort of beginning. The campaign is like, well, we just have to explain to people better. And even Manchin says this. You just have to explain to people better about what you've done. And it's like, I don't know. It seems like they've been doing a lot of explaining lately, and people are tuning it out. And it and again, maybe there is some sort of mistake about like, oh, people aren't tuned in to the election. I feel like we're more engaged politically than we have been in recent memory. Maybe they're just tuning out messages that they think suck.
Yeah, I mean, we've all got one of these in our pocket now. So yeah, we're all engaged. It's a heck of a gamble. The strategy, and I think a lot about what several of the members told me last week. When you ask the follow up, okay, what can they do differently? There were a couple of don't want to talk about that or don't want to get into that. I'm not sure. To your point, I'm not sure anyone has this magic elixir, and I think in large part this reason we've been talking about these issues are very different. Inflation is very different than the war in the Middle East, which is very different than the southern border situation, which is obviously very different. Folks who still feel like they were left out of the U.S. economy transforming decades ago. Well, and this perception about the economy, this might be the hardest one. When you look at the polling, people feel pretty good about their own finances, their own financial standing and situation, even longer term, looking down the road. But then when they're asked about the health of the economy, they think it's pretty bad. And one thing that's different now, it's flipped from 2020. The economy was going through some things because of the COVID pandemic. That was on Donald Trump's shoulders. He was the incumbent president. Well, now that's flipped. This perception of the economy, even though even some conservative economists that I've read recently or heard talking recently, they say the fundamentals of the economy are pretty good. But the perception is pretty bad. And that's on Joe Biden's shoulders. And Donald Trump doesn't have to, we heard Donald Trump kind of rooting for an economic downturn before the election because A, he wants to win, and B, he said he doesn't want to be Herbert Hoover inheriting a bad economy or having the economy crash on his watch. So, but those things don't hurt Donald Trump, but the perception of the economy, that's hurting Joe Biden. And I didn't talk to anyone last week, haven't talked to anyone for a couple years now who really knows how they can fix that part of the messaging. I do think sometimes the messaging, just from listening speeches or covering them, it's the same speech and it's not resonating, but they're not adjusting. I mean, he gave a speech at the Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Talked a lot about the shooting there, the white supremacist, it's a black church in the South. And at one point, a colleague was covering the speech. I was just listening for my own education. And all of a sudden, the president's talking about lead pipes in Flint, Michigan. Now, I get it. I get it. Predominantly black city. We all know what happened with the drinking water there. It was a crisis. And he's speaking to a black audience in South Carolina. They're worried about the black vote. But it just seemed out of place. It just seemed unfocused. And that was something else that the Democratic members said to me last week is sometimes it's just not focused enough. It's not aggressive enough. If Joe Biden could have done a shorter version of that speech and it could have been stronger, it could have really focused on the threat he says Donald Trump and his followers pose to the country. Of course, that awful day inside the church with Mr. Roof, the shooter. And he veered around to that same kind of stump speech. And it just didn't feel to certainly to me as someone who's been watching the White House for a while and others, it just didn't seem to land as much as maybe it could have.
Yeah, it also, I think it's a fair comparison sometimes, because, to look at the way that Biden handles things compared to how Obama, did, obviously, because they're bringing Obama out. I mean, there was this ad that I, saw it was a YouTube ad, and Obama and Biden are in the frame, and Obama does like 90% of the talking. About like why it's important to elect Joe Biden and why it's important to donate money to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And Biden's just there, kind of nodding. And it's like, wait a second, who's the president here? And like, again, there's a risk of suffering in comparison, to somebody who, the way that they handle it, because the way that Obama handled, the shooting at the Mother Emanuel Church is quite different. I mean, it was one of the more stirring moments, in his presidency. And so I don't know. I think that I don't envy anybody trying to like figure out the puzzle pieces of this, but it's certainly like, I'm glad people are talking about it in sort of a more mature manner and saying like, yeah, here are the dynamics, laying them out, as opposed to just like, well, obviously, no one would, think about Trump anymore. Well, Trump, he's ahead in the polls now, including in the swing states that decide the election. So one thing I want to also, you note this also in your story, which is, several people have said that they would like to see also more focus on abortion rights, because, in 2022, I think that there's a valid argument to make that the Democrats were probably saved from a really bad election night by the Supreme Court striking down Roe versus Wade. There's another abortion case. This one over the abortion medication mifepristone before the Supreme Court. So there may be something that that may be injected, but it doesn't seem to be the thing that's coming from out of the campaign.
No, they have not hit that issue really hard at all. And again, when asked, they say things like, we have plenty of plans to talk about abortion rights as we get closer to the election. They are really, at least for now, and campaigns change out leadership all the time when things aren't going well. But for now, they're waiting. They're sitting back and they're waiting. They just don't believe people are thinking about the choice that they're going to have to make in November. This is not really what I expected. I expected at least a slightly more focused and aggressive campaign. I think a lot of people did. A lot of the members that I talked to last week certainly did. They want to see. They just want to see more from this reelection campaign, and there are frustrations. I mean, Benny Thompson said that members do talk about, and they are concerned about these. I guess it's a decade now of these tensions between people who were close to Barack Obama and worked for him, and people who have been loyal to Joe Biden even before he was vice president. And that's what a Washington Post story recently broke the news that Obama had gone not just to senior Biden campaign officials, but the president himself in a private lunch to voice his concerns about the reelection campaign. But, it's a fascinating story. I urge everyone to look it up. And you get into the heart of the story, and you have senior Biden aides reminding the reporter that, well, it was President Obama and several of his senior aides who urged then Vice President Biden to not run in 2016. And how did that work out? Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump. So they're very bitter about how all that went down. And Thompson said, yeah, there's talent in both camps, and they need to get on the same page and get together. And I said, how long can these tensions go on? And he essentially said, not another day. They need to figure this out and put it behind them, at least from now until November.
Yeah. I mean, and one of the things that, I mean, perhaps, we're seeing too is that because, the Democrats didn't do the caucuses in Iowa at the same time as the Republicans, they ceded their first place, the spot there, and the Republicans sort of had the state to themselves. And then again, the headlines are, Donald Trump rolls, to victory, like quite easily. And then New Hampshire, because the Democratic Party wanted South Carolina to go first, they're not putting Biden on the ballot in New Hampshire, so that left Dean Phillips all to himself up there, literally all to himself. Had an event, campaign event that nobody came to. So there's no Biden headlines there. Whereas it's like how will Haley hold on? I mean, there's still some drama with the Republicans there, and so finally they get to South Carolina eventually, where where is the point where the campaign did turn around in 2020. To be fair for Biden, but it seems like a long time to wait. When again, I think most professionals just acknowledge, aside from something really unforeseen, Trump and Biden are going to be the nominees, and there's really not very much time to go.
No, and as you allude to there, Trump could have two victories, including maybe being able to, say he held off the surging Nikki Haley in New Hampshire, and she was the closest thing they had to a real challenger for me. Ron DeSantis basically moved to Iowa for 6 months, and he finished 30 something points behind me. Haley couldn't beat me in New Hampshire. And now I'm back in the South and ready to romp here, and maybe run the table from there. And Joe Biden is giving an 8-minute acceptance speech somewhere in South Carolina, and Trump gives an hour long rally,
stem winder,
yeah, and says all kind of outrageous things, and all the coverage, because this is what Trump is so good at, is this attention seeking and this coverage. He just sucks up all the media coverage. There are a lot of reasons for that, including some business reasons. But I just don't know how even Biden's first victory in South Carolina, I just don't know how they compete message wise or getting that coverage with Trump. And it will be a big deal for Biden because of what you said. That's where his campaign was saved by voters in South Carolina, but especially Congressman James Clyburn, who surprised everyone by endorsing Biden 4 years ago in South Carolina, and then he was off to victory in other primaries. So that's a challenge, and I got different answers on that, from Manchin saying just don't worry about Trump, to Hoyer and others saying you got to remind people every day, as just about all Democrats say, that Donald Trump is a threat, and the second term he would view himself as above the law and out for retribution, and you got to hit that message every day. So it's not like there's agreement among all these Democrats on what the campaign should do, and
they're just asking them to do something.
I was sitting in Delaware reading my story and other stories and listening to folks on cable news and trying to say, okay, well, let's take some of this advice and let's adjust. I'm not sure I would know exactly how to adjust.
Well, John, thank you very much for your reporting. It's a really good read. I'll hold up the paper again, although obviously most people, if they're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on iTunes or Google Play, they'll probably just go to the internet, which is great too. Wherever you read Roll Call. take a look at John's story, and we'll see you next time around Political Theater. Thanks again, John.
Thank you.